My lead source tonight is the chief executive of a state where more than 180,000 people get tax credits through the Affordable Care Act. Democratic Governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. And thank you so much for being here, Governor, because on just the affordability in and of itself that you heard the president talking about there, do people in your state who are paying more at the grocery store, do they believe that higher grocery prices, higher utility costs are a con job?
The president thinks we're stupid. The president is telling us to believe our lying eyes. I mean, Caitlin, think about it. I mean, this past weekend, I went shopping with my daughter, and we bought fruit, we bought bread, she wanted some whipped cream. I bought some coffee, some basic items, and it was over $100. That is not a con job. That is the fact that we are watching grocery prices continue to explode. It's the fact that people are watching their energy prices have jumped over 20% since the President of the United States went back into that office. It's the fact that we're watching everything from the food that we are eating to the clothes that we are wearing to the fact that the average new car price now is over $50,000, that is not a con job. And so the president knows that his policies, his tariff policies that have made things more expensive, that they are not popular. So what does he then do? He just tries to change the conversation and make people focus on something else and make other people to blame for it. But he campaigned on this. He has not gotten it done. And I think the election results that we saw last week are a direct reflection of the fact that the people are not buying what he is selling.
Do you worry that Democrats here in D.C. have lost the momentum from those elections a week ago tonight that your party gained, and as I'm sure you'll acknowledge, had not really had in a year probably. Do you think they lost that momentum by ending this shutdown fight?
Well, I mean, I don't know about election momentum. What I do know is I'm not sure exactly what was accomplished from this deal. When you look at the fact that, this deal says things like, well, we're not going to cut SNAP, or we are going to reimburse federal workers who have been working and not getting paid during this time period. My answer is, oh, you mean follow the law? I'm not sure what exactly was negotiated. I am very clear that I want the federal government reopened. I never wanted it closed in the first place. This has had a more significant impact on the state of Maryland than any other state inside this country. So we need the federal government reopened. And I'm also very clear, though, that a prerequisite for reopening the federal government should not be cutting people off of health care. The fact that I'm still working right now, just today, I was with military veterans. I myself am a military veteran, so I was with a bunch of our fellow veterans, knowing that 24,000 veterans are also on SNAP, which I am now having to cover in the state of Maryland because the President of the United States would rather break the law than actually fulfill his SNAP requirement. And so this is the type of thing, and these are the type of games that Washington plays that is so frustrating for not just chief executives in our states, but for also people who have to live and exist in the type of chaos that's being created right now.
So how would you judge how Democrats handled this shutdown? Do you think they failed or they succeeded?
What I know is that I'm still having to cover down on SNAP for my people. That just last week, I authorized $62 million for SNAP because I was not going to wait for the President of the United States to follow the law. What I know right now is we are still about to watch people's premiums explode, where we are going to watch families in Maryland who are going to watch their premiums jump by $5,000 and $10,000 and $15,000, premiums that were already too high in the first place. And so I don't know how to match who wins and loses when it comes to political games. What I do know is this, is that our people are losing. And that is what is so frustrating for me as the chief executive and for so many people who have to live and exist as if we are just numbers or pawns on a larger chessboard that we're not in control of.
Who do you think those people who are going to see higher premiums, should nothing happen, should there not be an agreement on that vote that the Democrats have been promised here, who do you think those people should hold responsible?
Well, I can tell you who I'm hearing as I'm going all around the state of Maryland. When I'm over in Western Maryland and I'm talking to people in Allegheny and Garrett County who have seen how the Trump administration has denied all federal disaster relief to them despite having historic floods because, in the words of the White House, well, support for Maryland is not warranted. I know when I go to Prince George's County and I see how people saw the FBI building was now taken away via a press conference with Donald Trump, where he just made a random statement saying that the FBI building is not going to go to a quote unquote liberal state, despite the fact that this is going to be worth 7,000 jobs, $4 billion of economic activity, and was a 10-year process for the FBI building to go to the state of Maryland. I know when I'm going over to Baltimore County or Howard County and I'm talking to people and they say, well, I don't understand. If the president has the White House, the Senate, and also the House of Representatives, how is it that it's the Democrats' fault? So I think people are pretty clear as to why we are in the shutdown in the first place, about the damage that has happened since Donald Trump has retaken the office. And so people are pretty clear about where they're putting the blame right now for what's happening.
Well, and on the cost of living, obviously we talk about this at a federal level. That's what we're talking about here on Capitol Hill. But on the state level, the Maryland State Comptroller's report that came out found that almost a third of people who have left your state since 2010, the last 15 years, they moved to Florida. Do you believe that Florida is doing something better than Maryland is?
No, because I think the things that we know that have been longstanding challenges within the state of Maryland, that one of the primary challenges has, for example, been things like the cost of housing, where 37% of young Marylanders said they would consider leaving the state of Maryland for one reason: housing costs. And it's the reason that for the past 2.5 years, and I've been very proud of the fact that I've been one of the most aggressive governors in the country to address the issue of housing costs, focusing on transit-oriented development, focus on density bonuses, now saying that we are going to incentivize local jurisdictions to work with the state to build more housing and fast, saying I want an inventory of all state-owned land, and saying that all state-owned land should be eligible to create more housing on it, because we've got to increase supply, because the only way you're going to bring down costs when you have population growing and increased demand is you've got to increase supply. And so when I'm looking at things like how aggressive we've been on housing and saying we want to build housing now and fast, the reason is because we want to be able to help bring the prices down to help to be able to support the population growth that we're seeing now in the state of Maryland.
Yeah, and on that front, I mean, obviously that has been a huge issue. This data was from last month that talked about how highly regulated the state is and what that looks like when it comes to residential development. Obviously, that's something you know very well, but this is something that people are struggling with every day. And, I wonder what you think they hear when they hear the president talk about this. He talks about a 50-year mortgage as something that he is now floating out there that has been brought to him, because that is such a very real concern for people, not just in Maryland, but everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's also a very real concern when it comes to housing and building housing is the cost of supplies. And that's where you look at things like how his tariffs have been so damaging. Just last week, I was doing a roundtable with small businesses in Prince George's County, and I was meeting with a woman named Julie, who runs Denison's Brewing, which is a brewing company, a family-owned brewing company, who has said that the cost of aluminum, for example, because of the cost of aluminum has been spiking, and because it's only the big boys, the big players, the massive corporations that are able to basically buy all the domestic aluminum, that for our small businesses, they oftentimes have to import foreign aluminum, which means that all of her prices have skyrocketed, and she has not taken a salary to avoid continuing to lay off workers. And so I'm seeing that when it comes to things like our brewers. I'm seeing that with things like our home builders, when you're talking about everything from wood and additional materials to build. And so this is another reason why his tariff policies have not just been incredibly damaging to our long-term economic prospects, but incredibly confusing to our small businesses who actually rely on a measure of stability and transparency that these economic policies from this president are not providing.
Do you think Democrats are doing enough on that front with the president, either bringing attention to that or talking about enough? I mean, we heard Senator Angus King, who caucuses with Democrats yesterday, saying that in this shutdowns fight specifically, standing up to the president didn't work. Do you think Democrats in Washington are being effective enough in what you just laid out there?
I think that when I'm speaking to the people of my state, the reason that the people of my state are fighting for us is because we know we fight for them. the reason that they know that I will work with anyone, but I will bow down to no one. And we are always going to make sure that the people of our state are protected, despite the type of assault that we are now seeing from Washington, D.C. I think people need to understand and people need to see that for a lot of these elected officials who are spending their time coming up with reasons why we shouldn't fight, instead of actually coming up with a concerted fight, for elected officials who are spending their time continuing to hide behind the fact that if we just don't speak up, that maybe the beatings will stop. They'll realize, and the people will let them know, that your leadership in this moment is not needed nor required. That we have got to be able to stand up for our people, and we've got to make sure that our voices are heard. And that is why I think we're seeing momentum in places like Maryland, that in other places, and that are choosing not to do this, that we are watching them continue to fall behind, because bending the knee is never going to work with this administration.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.